Hello everyone! So various unfortunate and unforeseen circumstances have led me to this point in which I have not drawn a single thing in over 3 months. And apparently the only natural course of action was to decide to film myself drawing for the first time in so long so that the internet has a record of just how badly this is possibly going to go. But all jokes aside, what I really wanted to talk about in this video was consistency and how much does consistent drawing practice really matter. And like I said at the beginning of this video, it has literally been 3 months since I've actually drawn something, which it has been years since I have taken that long off from drawing or painting any traditional sort of artwork. Really, the only time that I would take a somewhat prolonged break like that would be during the summer if I'm busy building a costume or doing any kind of prop work, but even then I still feel like I'm not losing the fluidity in my arm, if you could call it that, because I'm painting still, like I am painting props, it's just not traditional artwork, but this time it was literally, I had not done like anything. And so I was pretty nervous to actually pick up a pencil again and try to get back into things because I knew like something was going to have suffered in that time from just inactivity of my arm. So I decided to start off with something I deemed a more simple shape, but normally obviously I'm doing portraits mainly, and I thought that that might have been a little too much to start off with, so I wanted to do something that was more shape-based and not necessarily so precise measurements and precision for the drawing like certain facial features would be, and trying to get a portrait to look like a particular person. So I decided to start this by drawing Baby Yoda. And other than I obviously didn't get a chance to do any Baby Yoda artwork in kind of the height of the Baby Yoda craze of the internet, but he is a much more simple shape. Like his skull and his ear shape can be broken down into fairly simple shapes, and he's a very symmetrical creature, and I figured that I could probably break his facial features down into more simple shapes, and it was probably going to be a more manageable drawing to start out with because I didn't actually bother like warming up or like doing any sort of studies before this. It was just like dive in and draw Baby Yoda after not drawing for so long. I also felt pretty comfortable with this being the first drawing back because I did spend a very long time sculpting his head in that hiatus period, so I was fairly familiar with the different details of his face, so I figured I could probably manage that in drawing form. And for his cloak, I did a pretty rough sketch. I wasn't sure how much detail I was going to actually really put into the cloak. I definitely wanted his face to be more of the focal point. So the cloak sketch was really just kind of outlining the overall shape of it and not worrying so much about the details. Quick little pause because I'm sure people are going to start commenting and asking what paper I am drawing on for this video, but I actually decided to pick up and try out a couple of these Arteza watercolor books. It was a 2-pack, so this is the one that I'm not currently using, but this one is the 8.3 inches by 11.7 inch variety. They did come in various sizes, but it was a 2-pack and it was pretty inexpensive for this kind of hardbound watercolor book. But the other reason why I wanted to try these is because immediately when I saw these, they reminded me of the Travelogue watercolor books, which you can see just how similar they are. The material is a little lighter on the Travelogue, but the closure piece thing that keeps the book closed is literally the same, and I kind of just wanted to see how similar these books might be because this square one was like double the price, I think almost, of the 2-pack of these ones. So we're gonna test out and see what I think about the possible similarities between these two types of books as well in this video. Now, the whole reason I actually decided to go after the Arteza books was because in the period of not being able to draw, like there was a point where I physically was unable to draw because I was sick and then eventually also couldn't walk for a couple of weeks. Of course, in that time period, I decided to come up with like a list as long as my arm for drawing and painting ideas because what else are you going to do when you can't actually do anything? And one of the things I decided that I wanted to kind of challenge myself with is I had this idea of, in an attempt to try and get myself to draw more frequently, because doing these YouTube videos, surprisingly, a lot of the time is not actually spent drawing. So I figured having somewhat of a little side project, just a little personal side project, might actually get me to draw a bit more. And for that, I decided, why not challenge myself to try and fill a sketchbook or a couple of sketchbooks with favorite fictional characters? Because, like I said, do normally like drawing portraits a lot, and I thought that was a broad enough theme, but still a theme that I could probably stick to. And haven't really decided on any sort of specific set challenges, but I would like to see if by the end of the year I could fill up these 2 Arteza sketchbooks full of various fictional characters. For this Baby Yoda painting, I was kind of trying to figure out whether, basically if there was a specific style I wanted to stick all of the drawings to. Originally I did plan on possibly doing an acrylic ink sketch base with then watercolor coloring it in, which clearly is not what I was doing with this original one. I did eventually end up adding some ink, but still a little undecided as to whether I want all of the drawings of these characters to be a specific style or just kind of let it flow naturally and do the characters in whatever style sort of suits my mood for that particular character. But now that I've rambled on forever, let's actually go back to the topic that I wanted to talk about in this video, and that is drawing consistency. Now, clearly you can see this painting is not turning out to be a total train wreck. I mean, right now it's a little sketchy looking, but it does eventually not turn out to be a total train wreck. So for me personally, I find that I don't want to say practice doesn't matter, because it does matter, and consistency I find does, at the very minimal sense at least, keep my arm loosened up, I guess you could say. I find that the longer that I spend not drawing or drawing the wrong sorts of things and not really loosening up, my arm does feel tight. And I know that is a very strange thing to say, but if you are an artist, you probably will feel this sensation. It's almost like your arm and your brain are working in different ways. Like, your brain knows how to draw this thing and how you want this to turn out, and your arm is just kind of going in the wrong direction. I don't know how else to describe it. But maybe you're trying to draw a curve and it's just way too jagged, or it's not smooth enough, and it's that kind of sensation of your arm just being tight and basically unused. And so for me, drawing consistency ends up making me loosen up my arm, and I find that not only do the drawings turn out possibly better when I've been drawing more consistently, but I find that I get sketches and drawings to the point that I want them to be faster. So especially for sketches, when I've been drawing consistently, I find that I will, say, erase less. If I'm, say, working on a particular photorealistic portrait, I find that getting towards the likeness of that person ends up coming a lot easier and a lot faster if my hand is not, say, rusty. But on the other hand, I find that I end up doing my best work when I am really inspired and passionate about what I'm working on, which is why I tend to not be someone that sketches an awful lot. It's not that I don't feel like I need the practice, because I definitely could use the practice, and that's one of the great things about practice, is that you will gain skills faster the more you consistently practice and draw, because obviously you are putting in so many more drawings than someone else that is not practicing. So in that way, not great for me, but I just do not get, I don't say any joy out of practicing, but if I am really passionate and inspired about the piece that I am working on, it does not matter if I haven't drawn for months. It will, I think, turn out better if I'm really passionate about the idea. And it is something that I've always noticed. Like, I'm not going to necessarily point out any specific pieces, but I literally can tell you, like, the divide of the drawings that I had a super clear image of and I was super happy to start working on, and I just kind of blew through working on them because I just had to do it, like, now, and the ones that were more of a forced idea, I guess you can say, and off the top of my head, I literally cannot think of any particular painting that was a forced idea that is in, like, my top personal favorite paintings. So not an ideal situation to be in, but I would love to know if any of you are like this. Like, do you feel like you need the practice constantly, or is it more of a passion thing? And this kind of ties back into the idea behind this sketch and this little side project that I have going on with this fictional character sketchbook. Is I thought that maybe having a project focus, like, you know, you've got this sketchbook that is specifically for fictional characters that, you know, it's free reign for whoever you want to paint, but the idea is to not necessarily worry about making these masterpieces, just sketches that, you know, I was hoping to have them all be watercolor, but nothing that's like a super crazy time sink, just a little bit of an activity that will get me hopefully drawing a little more consistently, because honestly, ever since I've been doing these YouTube videos and working on YouTube videos more frequently, because there's so much other work behind them, I just don't feel like I draw that much anymore, which is kind of crazy because, like, that is what you should be doing when you do art videos on YouTube. But I know, like, a few years ago when YouTube videos were not super my main focus, I was definitely able to get in more drawing. So I think having a little side project that I'm not super worried about filming, like, some of them might be filmed, some of them might not be. I will definitely do like a sketchbook tour at the end of this project, but just kind of a no worry project for myself that I can work at my own pace. And I just finished up the sketch with a white gel pen and a normal black ballpoint pen. Now on to the second topic that I wanted to cover in this video, which is a somewhat review of the Arteza watercolor books, but also a comparison to the Travelogue watercolor books. And short answer, I honestly don't think I can tell a difference between them. Both of them are branded as watercolor journals, although neither one of them has extraordinarily thick paper. The Arteza book has 110-pound paper, and I just looked it up. The Travelogue watercolor book apparently has 90, so the Arteza one technically has thicker paper in it. And really, neither one of those is true watercolor paper. If you're looking for something that has true, really nice, thick watercolor paper, the Strathmore, I believe it's the 400 series hardbound sketchbooks, have honestly the thickest paper in a sketchbook like that I have seen. And I know paper thickness is not the only judging point, I guess you could say, for paper quality, but it is one of the main factors in something that I wouldn't say I necessarily have an issue with, but one of the bigger issues with both of these sketchbooks is that their pages curl if you don't bother taping them down. Like, they have a very low warping factor, which is really not surprising given the thickness of the paper. It's kind of just to be expected when you have something that is probably closer to a more mixed media type of paper, so it doesn't really bother me because it's not like I was expecting miracles or anything, and I also just didn't really care if the pages warped that much. For me, this is being treated as more of a sketchbook with less water being used, I would say. Definitely I'm not worried too much about extensive layers of watercolor, so it's not a big, like, miss for me, but it obviously could be an issue for some people if you were really into, like, lots of water being used, like full color pages, lots of washes, all of that kind of stuff. Honestly, the only reason I own the Travelogue watercolor book is because it's a square, which I know is possibly a really dumb reason, but I'm super into square sketchbooks, and I saw someone talking about these Travelogue watercolor books, and I'd never tried one, and so I figured I would pick that one up. And I don't hate it. It's definitely not like my favorite sketchbook. I like it because it's square, mostly. So for the price of that book, because it is like a $30 to $40 Canadian book, and I think the 2-pack of these was like 20 or 25, so definitely a giant price difference, so kind of crazy that I can't really tell a difference between the two. Like, paper quality wise, I know a big thing with some cheaper watercolor papers, you could end up having like splotching issues, like where the paint just doesn't like sitting on the paper evenly, but for these two paintings, I did not notice anything like that at all. My main downfall for both of them is the same thing, and it's just that it's really, I would not consider this true watercolor paper because it's not that thick. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely a vast improvement over trying to use watercolor in like a standard sketchbook. It's just, if you went and bought like some pretty cheap, like student grade, true watercolor paper like the Canson XL series, you're looking at something that is almost twice as thick as this stuff. Yeah, so that's really my only downfall. I'm not sure, like definitely with the amount of water that I'm using for both of these, I would not want to necessarily try and paint on the backs of the pages, but that's not something I'm super into anyway. I like kind of having that buffer between paintings where the side opposite the painting is a nice plain page. Yeah, those are my thoughts on those sketchbooks. But seeing as we're coming to the end of this second drawing, I did decide to do this one in a very similar style to Baby Yoda, where I started with a watercolor painting base and then went in with a standard black ballpoint pen to do some detailing up and shading and line work. I just like the style of seeing the lines of the ballpoint pen. I could have done this before, but just felt like doing it in this order, just I guess to not overdo it with the pen, I guess, just use it in the areas that I felt needed it as opposed to like a full line art job, and then going in a bit with a white gel pen. Yeah, let me know if you think I should keep all of these fictional character illustrations all vaguely in this style, or whether you think I should kind of mix it up and do them in different styles for a bit of something interesting. I would also love to know who some of your all-time favorite fictional characters are so that I can maybe add them to this project. But that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.